Hello and welcome to U.Gov. U.Gov is all about you and the government. What is the government? What are the government functions that every society should be aware of? And what are your functions as a citizen? You have a function as well, not just the government. The government and the citizen, they interact. In fact, the citizen end up being the government. I am Itohan Olomu-Agbodo, and you're welcome to the show.
This week on EduBox, we will be taking a look at the structure of government. Government is a means by which organizational policies are enforced, as well as a mechanism for determining policy. Each government has a constitution, which is a statement of its governing principles and philosophy. Nigerian politics takes place within a federal framework in which executive power is exercised by the government. Legislative power is held by the real government, and there are two chambers of the legislature, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Together, the two chambers make up the lawmaking body at the federal level in Nigeria, called the National Assembly, which serves as a check on the executive arm of government. The highest judiciary arm of government in Nigeria is the Supreme Court of Nigeria, which was created after independence and also practices Baron de Montesquieu's principle of separation of powers based on the United States system.
You're welcome back. If you just joined us, this is U.Gov, and this week we are taking a look at the structure of government, and we are going to be focusing on the federal government. But first of all, let us go to the streets and hear what people have to say about government, what they know about structures of government or the classification of government. Stay with us.
When we say government, you and I, the government, but when we say government, what makes up government? We are the one. Government is administration of a certain set of people or country or locality. So when we say government, who makes up the government? You and I, the citizen, are the government.
If actually there's real what we call government, if they're actually doing something, I think that name government should really stand for them.
Government, I can really say they are the people in charge of, taking charge of the affairs of the country. You understand? And for example, in Nigeria, now when you say government, they need to comprise of the states, the federal, and the local governments.
In Nigeria now we have three levels of government. We have at the federal level, we have at the state level, and we have at the local government, at the local level.
I know we have the democracy, and we also have the military too. So presently in Nigeria now, since 1999, it has been democracy all through to this day.
Well, that was quite interesting. People giving their own perception of what government means to them and the various classes of government that they know about. Then what is government to you? Government is actually that body that regulates the society, that maintains law and order in terms of the public offices. We have maybe law enforcement agencies like the police and things like that. Those are structures put in place by the government. We have Prince Uzeme, a legal practitioner and a social affairs analyst, who will be talking about the structure of government with particular reference to the federal government. Stay with us.
Government, as I understand it, is a structure put in place by either by the people that are being sought to be governed, a structure put in place by them that brings in control, coordination, and adherence to the set rules and laws of that society. So whatever it is that brings about that sort of control, coordination, and general compliance to the set rules of that society is what I refer to as government. Now, this sort of control or coordination that I'm referring to as government can be either by one person. The power of the government can reside in one person, or it can be in a group of persons. It can reside in a group of persons, or even, in a lot of cases, it resides with the people. As in, the people are the ones that will say they are the government. So it depends on what structure is being practiced in a particular area, or in a particular country, or in a particular locality. So that structure, that arrangement that brings about coordination, that brings about adherence and obedience to the laws set in place by the people. That's a mechanism that ensures that people fall in line voluntarily. That's what I refer to as government. Classification of governments is not very straightforward. What we have is that classification of governments is done from different angles and perspectives. So it depends on where you are coming from. For example, I could classify governments by strictly what type of government are these people operating. As in, I'm asking the question, is it a unitary system of government? Is it a federal system of government? Is it a confederal system of government? Now, these three that I mentioned refers to where exactly the power resides in that government. Where the power resides in the center, in contradistinction to the units that make up that union, we call that a unitary system of government, where most of the real power resides in the center, and is the center that makes those decisions. I'll give an example. Out of the about 193 member countries of the United Nations that we have today, about 165 of them, of those countries, operate the unitary system of government. Now, the unitary system of government is not what the people call it per se. It is what it functionally is. So, I am referring to the government where, for example, the people could say that, oh, we are operating a federal system of government, but in reality, what is actually being operated is a unitary system of government. So that would also fall under my classification of unitary system of government. Then if I move on to the federal system of government, the federal system of government is where power has been shared between the center and the federating units, either states or regions or whatever the people decide to call them. That means that there are some powers or there are some responsibilities that are by law or by the constitution that are supposed to be performed only by the center. And there are others that should be performed by the federating unit. So in essence, we have a system where there is a kind of a 60-40 arrangement, where 60% of the power resides with the center and 40% with the federating units. So that is what we will refer to as a federal system of government. Then we cannot go to the last one, which is the confederal system of government, which is like a loose arrangement where autonomous or independent states come together to say that because of our common purpose or our common objectives, let us put in place a system where we can have a coordinating structure. We are not giving up our powers. We are not giving up our powers, but we want to put in a kind of coordinator or a coordinating group of persons. So these countries or these states, they would then come together, sign what generally happens to be a treaty. When that treaty is signed, then they now have this structure. I'll give you an example. What Europe is practicing right now, where Europe has a common currency, where they have the central system, is a kind of a confederating system. Even though we have different countries, we have France, Germany, Belgium, and all of that, they still have a system where the countries retain their independence, but they give a little over to the center to coordinate what they are doing in terms of either currency, in terms of movements across borders, in terms of inter-country trade, and all of that. So that's one system, one way of classifying government. Another way of classifying government is by the system of actual government that is being run. I would say here that the first system that comes to mind is the monarchy. Up till the 19th century, 90% of governments worldwide were monarchies. The monarchy is where power resides only in one family, where power moves from father to first son, and on and on and on. And you can trace a monarchy back centuries or decades, and you can see that it has been an unbroken line of father to son. In most monarchies, you have kings or emperors or someone with that sort of title. Now, within the monarchy itself, it also you can also break it down into what sort of monarchy is being run in this country. We have what we refer to as a constitutional monarchy, and while we also have an absolute monarchy. An absolute monarchy is where the monarch or the king has the power, both legislative powers, judicial powers, executive powers. He has the power to do a lot without really being questioned by anybody. His word is law. The king says, the king decrees. That is the law that everybody follows. That is an absolute monarchy. But today we have what we refer to as constitutional monarchies, where the king or the emperor has all the ceremonial regalia of the monarchy, but he doesn't really have actual power. The actual power resides in a different group of persons, either the parliament, the prime minister, or what have you. Like what the United Kingdom right now is practicing is what we refer to as constitutional monarchy, where the Queen of England is still the queen. In short, she's a queen over like up to 20 countries worldwide, but she has no actual powers to do anything. She just attends ceremonial functions and all of that. So that is the constitutional monarchy. Then we move on to another system of government, which is also very popular today, which is a democracy. What Abraham Lincoln referred to as the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Simply put, a democracy is a government where power resides with the people, where the people have the power to choose who will lead them for a particular period of time. So in a democracy, it's the people that have the actual power. In a democracy, again, we still have a subset of two kinds of democracy, basically. We have the direct democracy, and we have the representative democracy. In a direct democracy, what we have is where the power, every man, the power actually resides with every person in that society, and they have the power to elect or to reach decisions on their own. Like what was being practiced in Eastern Nigeria before the white man came is what we refer to as direct democracy, where there will be a town hall meeting or whatever, and the men of the society, they can come together and vote on issues directly. Then in a representative democracy, what you have is that the people come together and they elect people to represent them. Like what we are practicing today in Nigeria, where we elect senators and members of the House of Reps and all of that. And it is those people that make decisions on behalf of the people, because the people, they have transferred that power to their representatives.
That was Prince Uzeme talking about various forms of government, oligarchy, monarchy, democracy. He even talked about the federal government. So classification of government actually has to do with the type of government, what the government is meant to do, or what the system they actually operate on is based upon. So that is what structure of government is about. So that's what classification of government is about. But we want to go on a quick break now. We'll be right back.
LoveWell Plus website is your #1 trusted companion as we make sure we never leave you without a smile. Using a world-class design for an easier user experience across the world. We make sure that you get the freshest and latest news on our news platform. And on entertainment, we get you covered. Find out what's going on in the world of sports as we are there to give you numbers. And with our social affairs shows, we keep you in the know. Enjoy the Word of God each day, as one word from God will change your life forever. We also give you an opportunity to communicate with us through prayers and through your partnership. It's a whole new experience with the LoveWell Plus website, as we help you create your own atmosphere everywhere you go. LoveWell Plus, taking you beyond television.
You're welcome back. We still have Prince Uzeme standing by, and he'll be talking about Nigeria's federal system of government. Nigeria is actually a democracy, but we operate a federal system of government. So he's going to be telling us what our structure is like, what the Nigerian federal structure is like, and he will also be making comparisons with other jurisdictions. Stay tuned.
Like I stated before, a government is not federal merely by the fact that it's being called a federal system. A government is federal where powers have been shared between the center and the federating units, which could be states or regions. Now, the structure of the federal system of government, as is, let's take Nigeria for example, as it's being practiced in, let's say Nigeria, is that we at the federal level, that's the center, we have government divided into 3 different arms: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. The executive is the arm of government that has the actual power, that controls the agencies of government that have the power of force or violence. So the government, the executive would be headed by the head of the federation itself. In some cases, the president, or in other cases, the prime minister. And the council or the members of the cabinet would be the ministers that are working for the president. And the president would then have the power to control the army, the police, and all of that. That is that for the executive. For the legislative arm, their function is basically to make laws. They make laws, and when those laws are passed, the executive enforces those laws by using the power of those agencies under it that can use force, like the police, the army, and other law enforcement agencies. Then the judiciary, they are basically persons whose duty is to interpret the laws that have been made by the legislature. So it is the judiciary's interpretation of the particular law or the intendment of the legislature that the executive actually goes on to enforce. So these are basically the three subsets of government that we have at the federal level in a democracy: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And basically those are their functions. Nigeria operates the federal system, but borrowed, let's say, from the United States. The federal system of Nigeria is actually modeled after the United States. But what happens is that the system in Nigeria is modeled after the United States in outward appearance. But when you come to the nitty-gritty and when you interrogate the system as we should, you discover that there is a whole lot that Nigeria is practicing that is kind of not known, either in the United States democracy or in other democracies. What the United States has, for example, is that apart from defense, apart from the areas that the Constitution has isolated or cut out for the federal government to operate, we have a structure where a lot of what obtains at the federal level also obtains at the state level. I will give you an example. In the United States, each state has a Supreme Court. There are different levels of state courts. And you have the Supreme Court, let's say the Supreme Court of the state of Texas, for example, from where appeals would lie to the federal Supreme Court. So in the United States, the states actually have executive powers. Powers to not only have their legislative and judicial structures, but also powers where they have their own executive structures, like their own law forms of police, for example. In the United States, you have the Federal Bureau of Intelligence, the FBI, that is federal, that cuts across all the states. But you also have the sheriffs that happen to be state police or police that are peculiar to every county in the United States. But in Nigeria, what we have is that we have only one police, and that police is federal. So at the state level, the states do not really have executive powers because they do not have the power, so to speak, to control or enforce their own laws. Because for the states to have the police, they will need to revert to the federal level to be able to have the force of law that is needed to enforce what they have. So in that, my recommendation would simply be that there should be a form of state police. Because if we are modeling our democracy after those that have gone before us, we should be able to sieve and take in what should be beneficial to us. So I think the states should have some form of executive power to be able to enforce their laws. That's one. Then on the judicial side of things, the state governments should have more levels of courts. Because right now, what we have generally is that in the southern part of Nigeria, we have the magistrate courts as an inferior court, while we have one superior court, which are the state high courts. Appeals lie from the state high courts to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal is a federal court. So appeals lie from the state high courts to the Court of Appeal in the state structure. It would be better if there were one or two more levels of courts at the state level, so that appeals from the high court, the state high court, would lie to the state Court of Appeal. From the state Court of Appeal, it will then move on to the Supreme Court of that state before it gets to the federal level. I think in that way, justice would be done more efficiently. Then the same thing for also the legislature. I would say that our legislature, so strictly speaking, is not too different from what obtains in the United States, because at the state level, we have the state legislature, which that we refer to as the House of Assembly of the states. And at the federal level, we have two levels in the legislature. That is the Senate and the House of Representatives. So on the legislative side of things, I don't think we are doing too badly. My recommendations would lie more to the side of the executive powers and also judicial powers.
Well, that's quite interesting, and as he said, the government should not just be a mere caricature of what a federal government should be. It should actually be a federal government in terms of operation and not having some states running to the center all the time looking for aid, looking for support. We should actually operate a true federal system of government in Nigeria. We have some tidbits for you. Stay with us. Well, we've come to the end of this week's episode of U.Gov, and the topic was structure of government, and we focused on Nigeria's federal system of government, looking at the federal government as a type of government, and our guest was Prince Uzeme. If you have comments you want to update, you can log on to our website on www.loveoplus.tv. I am Olomu-Agbodo. Bye for now.